The royal household at Kensington Palace buzzed with its usual morning activity when Catherine received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. Dr. Margaret Whitmore from the private genetics laboratory spoke in measured tones, but Catherine could sense the gravity behind her words. The DNA test results that had been ordered months earlier were finally ready, and the doctor insisted on delivering them in person rather than over the phone. Catherine set down her teacup with trembling hands. She had commissioned the test after discovering a mysterious jewelry box hidden in the depths of Diana's former private study at Highgrove House. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper yellowed with age, was a locket containing a photograph of Diana with a young woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to the late princess. On the back of the photograph, in Diana's distinctive handwriting, were the words, "My darling Sarah, one day the truth will set us all free." The discovery had haunted Catherine for weeks. She had always known about Diana's troubled relationship with her family, particularly the strained dynamics with her stepmother, Rain Spencer. But this photograph suggested something far more complex and deeply personal. The young woman in the picture shared Diana's bright blue eyes, her gentle smile, and even the way she tilted her head slightly to the left when posing for photographs. William had been away on royal duties when Catherine first found the photograph. She spent sleepless nights staring at it, wondering if she should bring her discovery to his attention. The weight of potentially uncovering a family secret that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy felt overwhelming. Yet her conscience wouldn't allow her to simply ignore what she had found. After much deliberation, Catherine had quietly arranged for the DNA test through Dr. Whitmore, a trusted geneticist who had previously worked with the royal family on medical matters. The process required obtaining a sample from Diana's personal effects, which Catherine managed to secure from a hairbrush that had been preserved among the princess's belongings. The second sample came from Sarah Mitchell, the woman in the photograph, whom Catherine had traced through private investigators. Sarah turned out to be a 45-year-old art teacher, living in a modest cottage in the Cotswolds. She had grown up believing she was adopted, raised by loving parents who had told her that her birth mother was a young woman who couldn't care for her. Sarah had always wondered about her origins but had never pursued the matter, respecting her adoptive parents' wishes to let sleeping dogs lie. When Catherine's investigators approached her, Sarah was initially skeptical, but agreed to the DNA test out of curiosity. The morning of Dr. Whitmore's visit, Catherine found herself pacing the length of her private sitting room. She had told William that she needed to handle some personal matters and would join him later for their scheduled engagement at a children's hospital in London. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to potentially uncover a secret involving a hidden child while they were meant to be celebrating children's welfare. Dr. Whitmore arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, carrying a leather briefcase that seemed to contain the power to rewrite history. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. Catherine had chosen her specifically because of her reputation for discretion and her understanding of the sensitive nature of royal family matters. As they sat in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, Dr. Whitmore opened her briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope. Her expression was serious as she looked at Catherine. "Your Royal Highness, I want you to understand that these results will likely have far-reaching implications. Are you certain you're prepared to know the truth?" Catherine nodded, though her heart was racing. She thought about Diana, about the pain the princess had carried throughout her public life, about the secrets she had taken to her grave. If Diana had indeed had another child, one who had been hidden from the world, then Catherine felt she owed it to both Diana's memory and to that child to uncover the truth. The envelope felt heavier than it should have as Catherine accepted it from Dr. Whitmore's hands. Her fingers traced the official seal of the laboratory before she carefully opened it. The technical language on the first page meant little to her, but the summary at the bottom was crystal clear. The probability of maternal relationship between Diana Spencer and Sarah Mitchell was 99.97%. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face as the implications hit her. Diana had indeed had another child, one who had been born and apparently given up for adoption before Diana's marriage to Prince Charles. This meant that William and Harry had a half-sister they had never known existed. More shocking still, it meant that the royal family had a direct heir they were completely unaware of. Dr. Whitmore watched Catherine's reaction with professional concern. "I understand this is overwhelming news, Your Royal Highness. The genetic markers clearly indicate that Sarah Mitchell is Princess Diana's biological daughter. Based on Sarah's age and birth records, she would have been born when Princess Diana was just 17 years old." Catherine's mind raced as she calculated the timeline. Diana would have been Lady Diana Spencer at that time, still living with her family and not yet in the public eye. It would have been possible to hide a pregnancy and arrange for a quiet adoption, especially with the Spencer family's influence and connections. The secrecy would have been paramount to protect both Diana's reputation and her future prospects. As the reality of the situation settled over her, Catherine felt a profound sadness for Diana. The princess had carried this secret throughout her marriage, through her very public divorce, and through all the media scrutiny that followed. She had lived with the knowledge that she had a daughter she couldn't publicly acknowledge, a child she had given birth to but couldn't raise. The photograph in the locket suddenly made perfect sense. Diana had somehow maintained contact with Sarah, perhaps through intermediaries or secret meetings. The tender expression on Diana's face in the photograph spoke of a mother's love that had never diminished despite the circumstances that had forced them apart. Catherine realized that she now faced an impossible decision. She held information that could devastate the royal family or potentially bring healing to old wounds. Sarah Mitchell had lived her entire life unaware of her true heritage, while Diana had died with her secret intact. The question now was whether the truth should finally be revealed, or whether some secrets were meant to remain buried forever. Catherine spent the remainder of the day in a daze, mechanically going through the motions of her royal duties while her mind churned with the implications of Dr. Whitmore's revelation. The children's hospital visit that afternoon felt surreal as she smiled and chatted with young patients, all while carrying the weight of Diana's secret. Every time she looked at a child, she thought about Sarah Mitchell, growing up without knowing her true mother's identity. That evening, Catherine made a decision that would set everything in motion. She couldn't bear the thought of keeping this information from William any longer. When he returned from his engagements, she found him in his study, reviewing briefing papers for the next day's events. The sight of him sitting at his desk, so much like his mother in profile, made Catherine's heart ache for what Diana had endured alone. William looked up as Catherine entered, immediately noticing her troubled expression. "Darling, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" His concern was immediate and genuine, a reflection of the caring nature he had inherited from his mother. Catherine closed the door behind her and took a deep breath. "William, I need to tell you something that's going to be very difficult to hear. Please sit down." Her voice carried a gravity that made William set aside his papers and give her his full attention. As Catherine recounted her discovery of the photograph and the subsequent DNA test, she watched William's face transform from curiosity to disbelief, to something approaching devastation. When she handed him the laboratory results, his hands shook as he read them. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Finally, William spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "My mother had another child." It wasn't a question but a statement of fact that he was struggling to process. "All these years, Harry and I thought we were the only ones who carried her legacy, but there's someone else out there." Catherine moved to stand beside his chair, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I know this is overwhelming. I've been struggling with it all day. But William, think about what your mother must have gone through. She was just 17, unmarried, and faced with an impossible situation. The pressure she must have felt to give up her baby to protect her future." William stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening gardens. "She carried this secret through our entire childhood, through the divorce, through everything. No wonder she always seemed to have such a deep sadness about her. We thought it was because of the marriage, but there was so much more." The weight of understanding settled over both of them. Diana's frequent charitable work with children, her passionate advocacy for young mothers, her emotional connection to causes involving family separation. It all took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of her hidden loss. Catherine joined William at the window. "There's something else you need to know. I've had Sarah Mitchell under discreet observation since we began this process. She's a remarkable woman, William. She's an art teacher who works with disadvantaged children. She volunteers at a local shelter for homeless families. In many ways, she's carrying on your mother's work without even knowing the connection. William turned to face Catherine, his eyes bright with unshed tears. What does she know about her adoption? Very little. Her adoptive parents were loving, but told her that her birth mother was young and couldn't care for her. They've both passed away now, so she has no way of learning more through them. She's never actively searched for her biological family, though I get the impression she's always wondered. The implications of the situation began to dawn on William. If this becomes public knowledge, it will change everything. Not just for our family, but for Sarah as well. Her entire life will be turned upside down. She'll become a target for media attention, for people who want to use her connection to Mother for their own purposes. Catherine nodded grimly. I've thought about that constantly. But there's another side to consider. She has a right to know who she is, and you and Harry have a right to know you have a sister. Your mother clearly loved her. That photograph proves it. Maybe it's time for the truth to finally come to light. Over the next several hours, William and Catherine discussed every possible angle of the situation. They considered the political implications for the monarchy, the personal impact on their own children, and most importantly, what Diana would have wanted. The late princess had always been guided by her heart and her desire to help others, often at great personal cost. William made several phone calls that night, reaching out to trusted advisors and security personnel. The decision to approach Sarah would require careful planning and absolute discretion. They couldn't risk the story leaking to the press before Sarah had a chance to process the information herself. By morning, a plan had been formed. Catherine would make the initial contact with Sarah, presenting herself as someone researching Diana's charitable work and asking to meet about Sarah's own community involvement. It would provide a natural opening for a conversation while giving Sarah the opportunity to react to the news in privacy. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. Here was Catherine, who had married into the royal family and often felt the weight of living up to Diana's memory, about to deliver news that would reveal another of Diana's children. It felt like Diana herself was reaching across the years to finally unite her family, as they prepared for what would undoubtedly be one of the most significant conversations of their lives. Both William and Catherine felt the presence of Diana's spirit guiding them. The woman who had always fought for truth and compassion was finally getting her chance to bring her hidden daughter home. The next morning brought unseasonably warm weather, as if nature itself was conspiring to create the right atmosphere for revelation. Catherine dressed carefully in simple, approachable clothing, knowing that her appearance could make all the difference in how Sarah received her unexpected visitor. The drive to the Cotswolds gave Catherine time to rehearse what she would say, though she knew that no amount of preparation could truly ready someone for news of this magnitude. As the countryside rolled past her window, she thought about Diana making this same journey decades earlier, perhaps traveling to secret meetings with the daughter she had been forced to give up. Sarah Mitchell's cottage came into view just as the village church bells began to chime 11 o'clock. It was a modest but charming home with a well-tended garden that spoke of someone who found peace in nurturing growing things. Catherine could see why Diana might have been drawn to visit this place, to steal moments with the child she couldn't publicly claim. Sarah Mitchell answered the door with paint-stained fingers and a warm smile that immediately reminded Catherine of Diana's own radiant expression. She was taller than Catherine had expected, with Diana's elegant posture and graceful movements. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, and she wore a simple blue sweater that brought out eyes that were unmistakably Windsor blue. "Ms. Cambridge, I'm so sorry. I was just finishing up a painting session with some of my students," Sarah said, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Please come in. I have to admit I'm quite curious about your interest in my work with children. It's not often someone from London drives all this way to discuss community art programs." Catherine had introduced herself using her maiden name, not wanting to reveal her royal identity until the right moment. As she followed Sarah into the cozy sitting room, she was struck by how similar the space felt to the private areas of Kensington Palace, where Diana had spent quiet moments. There were books everywhere, fresh flowers in simple vases, and photographs of children's artwork covering one wall. "Your home is lovely," Catherine said, accepting the offered cup of tea, "and your work with disadvantaged children is exactly the kind of program I'm researching. I understand you've been volunteering for quite some time?" Sarah settled into an armchair across from Catherine, tucking one leg beneath her in a gesture that was purely Diana. Nearly 20 years now. I started right after university. There's something about working with children who need extra support that just feels right to me. I can't really explain it, but I've always felt drawn to helping young people who are struggling with identity or family issues. The irony of Sarah's words wasn't lost on Catherine. Here was Diana's daughter, unconsciously following in her mother's footsteps, drawn to the very causes that had passionately driven the princess. Catherine set down her teacup, knowing the moment had come to begin revealing the truth. Sarah, I need to be completely honest with you about why I'm here. My real name is Catherine Middleton, and I'm married to Prince William. Catherine paused, watching Sarah's face register surprise and confusion. I'm here because I've discovered something that connects you to my family in a way that will change your life forever. Sarah's hand flew to her throat, her eyes widening. I don't understand. What could possibly connect me to the royal family? There must be some mistake. Catherine reached into her handbag and withdrew the photograph that had started everything. She handed it to Sarah with gentle care. This was found among Princess Diana's personal belongings. Look at it carefully, Sarah, really look at it. Sarah took the photograph with trembling hands. Catherine watched as recognition dawned slowly across her features. The resemblance between the young woman in the photo and Sarah's own appearance was unmistakable. Sarah's free hand moved instinctively to her face, tracing her own features as she compared them to those in the image. This woman, she looks exactly like me, Sarah whispered. But this can't be Princess Diana. She was never… the timeline doesn't… Sarah's voice trailed off as she turned the photograph over and saw Diana's handwriting. Catherine leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Sarah, I had a DNA test done. Princess Diana was your biological mother, your William and Harry's half-sister. The photograph slipped from Sarah's nerveless fingers and fluttered to the floor. She stared at Catherine in complete silence for what felt like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. That's impossible. My birth mother was a teenager who couldn't care for me. She couldn't have been Princess Diana when she was 17 years old, before she married Prince Charles, before she became a public figure, Catherine said softly. She was Lady Diana Spencer, and she was faced with an impossible choice. She loved you enough to make sure you had a good life, even though it meant giving you up. Sarah stood abruptly and walked to the window, her breathing rapid and shallow. Catherine remained seated, understanding that Sarah needed space to process this earth-shattering revelation. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of children playing in a nearby garden. Finally, Sarah turned back to Catherine, tears streaming down her face. All my life I've felt like there was something missing. Not because my adoptive parents weren't wonderful, they were amazing. But there was always this sense that I was meant for something more, that there was a part of me I couldn't access. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I used to dream about my birth mother, wondering if she thought about me, if she regretted giving me away. Catherine's own eyes filled with tears. Sarah, from everything I've learned about your mother, she never stopped thinking about you. That photograph proves she found ways to stay connected to your life. She died knowing that you had grown into an extraordinary woman who was carrying on her work without even realizing it. Sarah picked up the photograph from the floor and studied it again. She looks so young here, but also so sad. There's something in her eyes. She looked up at Catherine. What happened to her? I know she died in the car accident, but what was she like as a person? For the next hour, Catherine shared stories about Diana that had never been made public. She told Sarah about Diana's private moments with William and Harry, about her midnight visits to hospitals, about her genuine love for people who were struggling. She described Diana's playful nature, her infectious laugh, and her deep capacity for empathy. She had this way of making everyone feel special, Catherine explained. Children especially were drawn to her. She could walk into a room full of shy, withdrawn kids and within minutes have them laughing and opening up. It's exactly what you do with your students, Sarah. You have her gift. Sarah absorbed every word, building a picture of the mother she had never known. Did she ever talk about having other children? Before William and Harry? Catherine chose her words carefully. Your mother was very private about her past, but looking back now, there were moments when she would become distant while working with young mothers or children in care. William remembers her having a particular tenderness toward teenage mothers who were struggling with difficult decisions. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah began asking practical questions. What did this mean for her life? Would she be expected to take on royal duties? How would the public react? Catherine explained that there were no expectations or obligations, that Sarah's royal heritage was hers to embrace or set aside as she chose. "William wants to meet you," Catherine said as the conversation began to wind down. "He and Harry both want to know their sister, but they also understand that this is overwhelming and that you need time to decide what you want." Sarah walked to her mantelpiece and picked up a small framed photo of herself with a group of her students. "These children depend on me. This life I've built here means everything to me. I'm not sure I'm ready for it to change." Catherine stood and joined Sarah by the fireplace. "Your mother would understand that completely. She always said that the most important thing was to follow your heart and do what felt right for you. Whatever you decide, Sarah, you should know that you're not alone anymore. You have family who wants to know you, if and when you're ready." As Catherine prepared to leave, Sarah walked her to the door. Will you tell William and Harry that I need some time? This is all so much to take in." "Of course," Catherine replied. "Take all the time you need. When you're ready, we'll be here." Sarah stood in her doorway long after Catherine's car had disappeared down the lane, still clutching the photograph of herself with the mother she was only now beginning to know. The drive back to London felt endless as Catherine wrestled with the emotional weight of her encounter with Sarah. Every few miles, she found herself glancing in the rearview mirror, as if she could somehow see the cottage where Diana's daughter was undoubtedly sitting in stunned silence. Trying to process the complete upheaval of everything she had believed about her identity. When Catherine arrived at Kensington Palace, she found William pacing in the private garden, his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in low, urgent tones to someone about security arrangements and media protocols. The moment he saw Catherine, he ended the call and hurried toward her. "How did she take it?" William asked before Catherine had even fully stepped out of the car. His face was etched with concern and barely contained emotion. Catherine took his hands in hers. "She's remarkable, William. She's everything your mother would have wanted her to become. But she's also overwhelmed and frightened. She needs time to process what this means for her life." They walked into the palace together, Catherine recounting every detail of her conversation with Sarah. William listened intently, asking questions about Sarah's mannerisms, her interests, her life in the Cotswolds. When Catherine described how Sarah worked with disadvantaged children, William's eyes filled with tears. "She's been carrying on Mother's work without even knowing it," he said quietly. "It's like Mother found a way to continue her mission through Sarah, even after death." That evening, William called Harry in California. The conversation lasted for over 2 hours, with Catherine occasionally adding details about her meeting with Sarah. Harry's reaction was a mixture of excitement and protective concern. He had always been the more emotionally open of the two brothers, and the idea of having a sister who shared their mother's passion for helping others appealed to him immediately. "I want to meet her," Harry said over the video call, "but not as a royal obligation or some formal introduction. I want to meet her as a brother who's finally found his sister." The next few days were a whirlwind of careful planning and emotional preparation. William and Catherine consulted with senior royal advisors about the potential implications of acknowledging Sarah publicly. The responses were mixed. Some feared the impact on the monarchy's reputation, while others saw an opportunity to show the royal family's human side. Meanwhile, Sarah's world had been turned completely upside down. She had called in sick to work for the first time in years, unable to face her students while her mind reeled with questions about her identity. She spent hours staring at the photograph, trying to find memories that might have been buried in her subconscious. Sarah began researching Diana obsessively, reading biographies and watching documentaries with new eyes. Every charitable cause Diana had supported, every speech she had given about helping children, took on personal significance. Sarah found herself crying as she watched footage of Diana visiting hospitals and schools, seeing her own mannerisms reflected in her mother's movements. On the third day after Catherine's visit, Sarah made a decision. She drove to the village library and asked to use their private computer room. With shaking hands, she composed an email to the address Catherine had given her. "Dear Catherine," she wrote, "I've been thinking about everything you told me, and I would like to meet William and Harry. Not as a royal event or anything formal, but as family. Could we arrange something private? I have so many questions about our mother, and I think I'm finally ready to start finding some answers. Catherine received the email within hours and immediately called William. They arranged for a private meeting the following weekend at Anmer Hall, the family's country home in Norfolk. The location would provide privacy and security, while maintaining the informal atmosphere Sarah had requested. The night before the meeting, Sarah barely slept. She changed clothes 3 times, unsure what one wore to meet brothers who were also future kings. Finally, she settled on simple jeans and a blue sweater, the same shade of blue she had been wearing when Catherine first visited. William and Harry arrived at Anmer Hall that Saturday morning, both visibly nervous. William had brought photo albums from their childhood, while Harry had prepared a playlist of their mother's favorite songs. They both wanted to share pieces of Diana with the sister who had never known her. Catherine answered the door when Sarah arrived, offering a reassuring smile and a gentle hug. "They're both as nervous as you are," she whispered as she led Sarah toward the sitting room. The moment Sarah walked into the room, both William and Harry stood frozen. The resemblance to Diana was undeniable, but it was more than just physical. Sarah carried herself with the same grace their mother had possessed, and her shy smile was hauntingly familiar. Harry was the first to speak, his characteristic warmth breaking the tension. "You have her eyes," he said simply. "Not just the color, but the expression, the way they light up." Sarah felt tears welling up as she looked at her brothers for the first time. "I can see her in both of you, too. Catherine showed me some photographs, but seeing you in person, it's like seeing pieces of a puzzle finally fit together." The initial awkwardness melted away as they sat together, sharing stories and memories. William showed Sarah photographs of Diana that had never been published, intimate family moments that revealed the mother behind the public persona. Sarah listened with rapt attention as her brothers described Diana's bedtime stories, her practical jokes and her fierce protectiveness of them. "She used to sneak us McDonald's," Harry said with a grin, "drive through the gates of Kensington Palace with Happy Meals hidden under a blanket in the back seat. She wanted us to have normal experiences, even if our lives were anything but normal." Sarah laughed, and the sound was so reminiscent of Diana that both brothers felt their breath catch. "I work at McDonald's during university holidays," Sarah said. "The manager always said I had a natural way with the children who came in with their families." As the day progressed, they discovered numerous similarities that went beyond genetics. Sarah shared Diana's love of ballet, her tendency to cry during sad movies, and her compulsive need to help anyone who seemed to be struggling. She also had their mother's mischievous sense of humor and her ability to put people at ease. William pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a video of his children playing in the garden. "They would love to meet their aunt," he said carefully, "but only when you're ready, and only if you want that kind of relationship with our family." Sarah watched the video with wonder. "I've always wanted children of my own, but it never seemed to work out. Maybe I was meant to be the aunt who spoils them instead." Harry leaned forward, his expression serious. "Sarah, I want you to know that none of us expect anything from you. You don't owe the royal family anything just because of your biology. You've built a beautiful life, and you should feel free to continue living it exactly as you choose." The honesty in Harry's voice moved Sarah deeply. "Thank you for saying that. I've been terrified that knowing the truth would mean losing the life I've created, but sitting here with both of you, I don't feel pressured. I feel complete somehow." As the afternoon sun began to set, they walked together through the gardens at Anmer Hall. Sarah told them about her work with children, her art, her quiet life in the Cotswolds. In return, William and Harry shared the challenges of growing up in the public eye and their ongoing efforts to honor their mother's memory through their charitable work. "Would you consider working with some of our charities?" William asked as they paused by a rose garden. "Not as a royal patron or anything official, but as someone who shares mother's passion for helping children. Your experience and approach could make a real difference." Sarah considered the suggestion carefully. "I'd like that as long as I can maintain my privacy and continue my work at home. The children I teach depend on me and I can't abandon them." As the day drew to a close, the 3 siblings had formed a bond that felt both new and ancient. They were connected not just by blood, but by shared values and a common desire to carry forward Diana's legacy of compassion and service. Standing together as the sun set behind the Norfolk countryside, they looked remarkably like their mother, each carrying forward different aspects of her spirit. Sarah had found her family, and William and Harry had discovered that their mother's greatest secret was also her greatest gift to them all. The weeks following the meeting at Anmer Hall brought a new rhythm to all their lives. Sarah returned to her teaching position, but found herself seeing her work through different eyes. Every interaction with her students felt more meaningful, knowing she was carrying forward a legacy that connected her to something greater than herself. William and Catherine began making regular, unofficial visits to Sarah's cottage in the Cotswolds. These weren't royal engagements but family visits where they would help in Sarah's garden or join her for simple meals while discussing their shared commitment to children's welfare. Catherine found herself developing a deep friendship with Sarah, appreciating her down-to-earth perspective and genuine warmth. Harry, despite being in California, maintained constant contact through video calls and messages. He was particularly interested in Sarah's art therapy work and began exploring ways to incorporate similar programs into his own charitable initiatives. The brother who had always been most open about his struggles with mental health found in Sarah someone who understood the healing power of creative expression. 1 month after their first meeting, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She called William and asked if she could visit Kensington Palace to see Diana's former private rooms. She wanted to understand more about the mother she was just beginning to know. William arranged for a completely private tour, ensuring that no staff would be present except for Catherine and himself. As they walked through the rooms that Diana had once inhabited, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of connection. She touched the furniture that Diana had chosen, looked out the windows where her mother had stood, and tried to imagine what Diana's daily life had been like. In Diana's former study, Sarah discovered something that made her gasp. On a bookshelf, almost hidden between larger volumes, was a small photo album. William had never noticed it before, but Sarah's artist's eye was drawn to its simple leather binding. When they opened it, they found page after page of photographs documenting Sarah's childhood from a distance. There were pictures of Sarah's first day of school, taken from across the street. Photos of her participating in school plays, captured from the back of crowded auditoriums. Images of her graduation from university, clearly shot with a telephoto lens from far away. Each photograph was labeled in Diana's handwriting with dates and brief notes. Sarah's first art exhibition, my beautiful daughter at 18. So proud of her compassion. William and Catherine stood in stunned silence as Sarah flipped through the album with tears streaming down her face. Diana had been watching her daughter's life unfold from afar, documenting every milestone she couldn't publicly celebrate. The pain of a mother forced to love from a distance was evident in every carefully preserved image. She never forgot me, Sarah whispered, clutching the album to her chest. Even with everything else in her life, she found ways to be part of mine. That discovery changed something fundamental in Sarah's relationship with her royal heritage. She began to understand that acknowledging her connection to Diana wasn't about becoming someone different, but about honoring the woman who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at a normal life. Sarah started accompanying William and Catherine to some of their private charitable visits, always maintaining her anonymity, but contributing her expertise with children who were struggling with trauma or identity issues. Her gentle approach and artistic background provided a unique perspective that complemented the royal family's more formal charitable work. The media remained completely unaware of Sarah's existence, which was exactly how everyone wanted it. The family had agreed that Sarah's privacy was paramount, and elaborate security measures were in place to ensure that her identity remained protected. She was simply known to staff as a friend of the family who occasionally assisted with charitable work. However, maintaining the secret became increasingly challenging as Sarah became more involved with the family's activities. Her natural compassion and Diana-like ability to connect with people made her invaluable in their charitable work, but it also increased the risk of exposure. The situation came to a head during a private visit to a children's hospital in London. Sarah was working with a young patient who had been struggling with severe anxiety following a traumatic accident. Using her art therapy techniques, Sarah had managed to help the child open up in ways that surprised even the hospital staff. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the child psychologist overseeing the case, approached Catherine afterward. "I have to ask, who is that young woman?" "I've been working with children for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone connect with traumatized kids the way she does. She has an almost intuitive understanding of what they need. Catherine found herself in an impossible position. She couldn't reveal Sarah's identity, but the doctor's professional curiosity was clearly aroused. "She's someone who works closely with our charitable foundation," Catherine said carefully. "She has extensive experience with children in care." Dr. Morrison nodded, but Catherine could see that the explanation didn't fully satisfy her. "It's remarkable. She reminds me of someone, but I can't quite place who. There's something about her manner. The way she moves, that seems familiar." That evening, Catherine shared the conversation with William and Sarah. They all realized that as Sarah became more involved in public-facing charitable work, the risk of someone recognizing her resemblance to Diana would only increase. They needed to make a decision about how much of their family secret they were willing to reveal. Sarah had been thinking about this possibility for weeks. "I've been wondering if complete secrecy is really what's best," she said quietly as they sat in William's private study. "Not a full public announcement, but perhaps we could find a way to acknowledge my existence without making it a major news story." William and Catherine exchanged glances. They had been having similar thoughts but hadn't wanted to pressure Sarah into a decision she wasn't ready to make. "What did you have in mind?" William asked gently. Sarah had clearly given this considerable thought. "What if we introduced me as a distant cousin who had recently been connected to the family through genealogical research? It would explain my involvement in charitable work and my resemblance to Diana without revealing the full truth. People who need to know could be told privately, but the public story would be simpler." Catherine was impressed by Sarah's practical approach. "That could work, but it would still mean giving up your complete privacy. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about what our mother would want. She always put helping others above her own comfort. If acknowledging my connection to this family means I can help more children, then maybe that's worth the sacrifice of some privacy." The decision wasn't made immediately, but they agreed to begin exploring the possibility. William consulted with senior advisors about the feasibility of introducing a previously unknown family member, while Catherine worked with security teams to develop protocols that would protect Sarah, while allowing her greater involvement in royal charitable work. Harry, when consulted via video call, was enthusiastic about the idea. "It feels right," he said. "Mother always believed in living authentically, even when it was difficult. If Sarah wants to step into this role, she should have that choice." As they planned for this potential transition, Sarah continued her work in the Cotswolds while gradually taking on more responsibilities with the royal charities. She was developing her own approach to public service, one that honored Diana's legacy while remaining true to her own values and experiences. The photograph album Diana had kept remained on Sarah's bedside table, a constant reminder that love could transcend any obstacle. Every morning, Sarah would look at those images of her mother watching over her from afar and feel strengthened for whatever challenges lay ahead. The little girl who had grown up wondering about her birth mother was slowly becoming the woman who would carry Diana's most important work into the future, bridging the gap between the royal family's public service and the grassroots community work that had always been closest to Diana's heart. The decision to gradually introduce Sarah to public life came sooner than anyone had anticipated. 3 months after her first meeting with William and Harry, a crisis at one of Diana's Memorial Children's Hospitals created an opportunity that seemed almost orchestrated by fate. A devastating fire had damaged the hospital's children's wing, displacing dozens of young patients and destroying the art therapy program that had been Diana's personal project. The hospital's director, Dr. James Hartwell, reached out to William's office requesting emergency support to rebuild not just the physical space, but the specialized programs that helped children cope with trauma. When William discussed the situation with Sarah, her response was immediate and passionate. "I have to help," she said without hesitation. "This is exactly the kind of work our mother cared about most. I don't care about maintaining my anonymity anymore. These children need help, and I have skills that could make a real difference." Catherine watched Sarah's face as she spoke about the children who would be affected by the loss of their therapeutic programs. The transformation was remarkable. This was no longer the uncertain woman who had been afraid of her royal connection, but someone who had found her true calling. William made the arrangements personally, calling Dr. Hartwell to explain that a family member with extensive experience in art therapy wanted to volunteer her time to help rebuild the program. He was careful not to reveal Sarah's exact identity, describing her only as a cousin who had recently become involved with the family's charitable work. When Sarah arrived at the temporary facilities where the displaced children were being treated, she was accompanied by a discreet security detail that most observers assumed was standard protocol for anyone associated with the royal family. What struck everyone immediately was Sarah's natural authority and compassion as she assessed the children's needs. Dr. Hartwell was amazed by Sarah's expertise. Within hours of her arrival, she had evaluated the facility, spoken with staff members, and begun working directly with the most traumatized children. Her approach was different from anything he had seen before. She combined professional art therapy techniques with an intuitive understanding of childhood trauma that seemed to come from deep personal experience. "She's extraordinary," Dr. Hartwell told William during a private conversation that evening. "The children respond to her in ways I've never witnessed. It's almost like she has some special connection to their pain." William felt a profound sense of pride mixed with sadness as he listened to the doctor's assessment. Sarah was displaying exactly the same gift Diana had possessed, the ability to reach people, especially children, who were struggling with loss and confusion about their identity. Sarah spent the entire week at the hospital, working 18-hour days to establish new therapeutic programs and train other staff members in her techniques. She slept in a small room at the facility, eating meals with the children and becoming completely absorbed in their care. It was during this week that the first photograph of Sarah appeared in the media. A local newspaper photographer covering the hospital's recovery efforts captured an image of Sarah kneeling beside a young patient, both of them painting on a large canvas. The photograph showed Sarah in profile, her resemblance to Diana unmistakable to anyone who looked closely. The image was picked up by national media outlets within hours, with speculation about the identity of the mysterious volunteer, who bore such a striking resemblance to the late princess. Royal commentators began analyzing the photograph, noting not just Sarah's physical similarity to Diana, but her mannerisms and the way she interacted with the children. William's press secretary found herself fielding dozens of calls from journalists asking about the woman in the photograph. The official response was simply that the royal family was supporting the hospital's recovery efforts and that volunteers' privacy should be respected. However, the media attention had been anticipated and plans were already in motion. That evening, William and Catherine met with Sarah at the hospital to discuss their options. They could continue to deflect media interest, but the photograph had made Sarah's resemblance to Diana too obvious to ignore indefinitely. "I think it's time," Sarah said calmly. "I've seen what I can accomplish when I'm free to work without worrying about secrecy. These children need advocates who understand their struggles, and I want to be able to do this work openly." The next morning, Kensington Palace released a carefully crafted statement announcing that Sarah Mitchell, a distant cousin of the royal family recently connected through genealogical research, would be taking on a formal role supporting children's charities. The statement mentioned her background in education and art therapy, and her personal commitment to continuing Diana's work with traumatized children. The media response was immediate and intense. Photographs of Sarah were analyzed by experts who confirmed her striking resemblance to Diana. Genealogy specialists were consulted about possible family connections. Most significantly, child welfare experts praised the announcement, noting that Sarah's work at the hospital had already demonstrated exceptional skill and compassion. Sarah handled her first media appearance with grace that surprised even herself. Standing beside William at a press conference, she spoke eloquently about her commitment to children's welfare and her desire to honor Diana's legacy through practical action rather than words. "I've spent my life working with children who struggle with questions about identity and belonging," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the cameras and intense scrutiny. "I understand what it means to wonder where you come from and where you fit in the world. That understanding drives everything I do." The questions from reporters were predictably focused on her resemblance to Diana and her sudden appearance in the royal family's charitable work. Sarah answered honestly but carefully, explaining that her connection to the family had been a private matter until she decided that her charitable work was more. important than her personal privacy? One reporter asked, directly about rumors that she might be more closely related to Diana than the official statement suggested. Sarah looked directly into the camera and said, "My relationship to this family is based on shared values and a common commitment to helping children in need. That's what matters, not genealogy charts or speculation about the past." The response was considered masterful by royal communications experts. Sarah had acknowledged the speculation without confirming or denying it, while redirecting attention to the work that truly mattered to her. In the days following the announcement, public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Sarah's combination of Diana's compassion with a more grounded, practical approach to charitable work appealed to people who had sometimes found the royal family's efforts too removed from everyday concerns. Harry called from California to congratulate Sarah on her handling of the media attention. "You were brilliant," he said. "Mother would have been so proud of how you balanced honesty with privacy, and how you kept the focus on the children rather than on yourself." Sarah's official introduction to royal charitable work opened doors that had been closed to her as a private citizen. Hospitals and schools that had previously been accessible only through lengthy application processes now welcomed her directly. Her expertise was suddenly in demand from organizations across the country. More importantly, Sarah discovered that acknowledging her royal connection, even in its official limited form, didn't diminish her effectiveness with the children she served. If anything, the additional resources and attention that came with royal patronage allowed her to help more children more effectively. The week at the hospital had shown Sarah what she was truly capable of when she embraced her heritage instead of hiding from it. As she continued to build bridges between the formal royal charitable structure and the grassroots community work she had always preferred, Sarah began to understand that her unique position could be a powerful force for positive change. Standing in the rebuilt art therapy room 6 months later, surrounded by children's artwork and watching young patients engage with healing through creativity, Sarah felt Diana's presence more strongly than ever. This was what her mother had envisioned, not just charity from a distance, but genuine connection and lasting change that grew from understanding and love. 2 years after Sarah's introduction to royal charitable work, the family faced an unexpected moment of truth that would test everything they had built together. An investigative journalist named Marcus Thompson had been quietly researching Sarah's background. Driven by the nagging sense that the official story about her family connection didn't add up, Thompson had obtained access to adoption records from the late 1970s through a contact at the General Register Office. Cross-referencing these with Diana's movements during that period, he had pieced together a theory that Sarah wasn't just a distant cousin, but Diana's biological daughter. His editor at the Daily Herald was preparing to run the story as their Sunday front page exclusive. The royal family's intelligence network alerted them to Thompson's investigation on a Friday afternoon. William, Catherine, Harry, and Sarah gathered at Sandringham for an emergency family meeting to decide how to respond to what would likely be the biggest royal revelation in decades. "We have until Sunday morning," William said grimly as they sat in the oak-paneled library, where countless royal family discussions had taken place over generations. "Thompson has enough evidence to make a compelling case, even if he can't prove it definitively. The question is whether we deny it, confirm it, or try to manage the narrative ourselves." Harry, who had flown in from California specifically for this meeting, was characteristically direct. "I think we should tell the truth, all of it. We've been living with this secret for 2 years and it's exhausting. More importantly, Sarah has proven herself to be exactly what this family needs. Why should we be ashamed of that?" Catherine looked at Sarah, who had been unusually quiet throughout the discussion. "What do you want to do? This will change your life completely. There will be no going back to privacy or anonymity." Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the estate where Diana had spent some of her happiest moments. When she turned back to face her family, her expression was resolute. "I've been thinking about this possibility for months," she said. "Every time I work with children who are struggling with identity issues, I think about the irony of my own hidden truth. How can I help them embrace who they are if I'm not willing to do the same?" She moved to the desk where Diana's photographs sat alongside images of William and Harry as children. "Our mother spent years carrying secrets that caused her pain. She couldn't acknowledge me publicly because of the constraints of her time and position. But those constraints don't exist anymore. not in the same way. William felt his throat tighten as he listened to his sister speak with such clarity about their mother's suffering. Are you certain? Once this is public, every aspect of your life will be scrutinized. Every relationship, every decision, every mistake will become public property. Sarah smiled, and in that moment she looked exactly like Diana at her most determined. I've watched you and Harry live with that scrutiny your entire lives, and you've both managed to do meaningful work despite it. I'm not afraid of the attention if it means I can help more children and honor our mother's memory openly. Harry leaned forward in his chair. What about your work in the Cotswolds? Your students there? They'll understand, Sarah said confidently. I've been honest with them about my commitment to helping children who are struggling. They know that sometimes that means making personal sacrifices for the greater good. Besides, I can still maintain my work there, just with better security arrangements. Catherine had been taking notes throughout the conversation. If we're going to do this, we need to control the narrative. Rather than responding to Thompson's story, we should release our own statement first. Get ahead of the speculation, William nodded slowly. We have Saturday evening to prepare a comprehensive statement. We'll need to coordinate with Buckingham Palace, brief the senior staff, and prepare for the media storm that will follow. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Palace communications teams worked around the clock to craft a statement that would present Sarah's story with dignity while addressing the inevitable questions about royal succession, Diana's legacy, and the family's decision to keep the truth private for so long. Sarah spent Saturday evening writing a personal letter to her former students and colleagues in the Cotswolds, explaining the situation before they heard it from media reports. She also recorded a video message for the children she worked with in her charitable roles, assuring them that her commitment to their welfare would never change. Sunday morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching the somber mood at Kensington Palace as they prepared for Sarah's truth to be revealed to the world. The statement was released at precisely 9 o'clock, before the Daily Herald could publish their exposé. The palace's announcement was comprehensive and emotionally honest. It confirmed that Sarah Mitchell was indeed Princess Diana's biological daughter, born when Diana was 17, and given up for adoption to protect both mother and child. The statement explained how Sarah had been discovered through private family research and had gradually become involved in charitable work over the past 2 years. Most importantly, the statement emphasized Sarah's own achievements and character, noting her decades of work with disadvantaged children and her natural gift for trauma recovery therapy. The announcement positioned her as someone who had unknowingly carried forward Diana's most important work, rather than simply as a newly discovered royal relative. The public reaction was swift and overwhelming. Social media exploded with discussions about Diana's secret, royal succession implications, and Sarah's remarkable resemblance to her mother. However, the dominant theme was positive. People were moved by the story of a mother's sacrifice and a daughter who had grown up to embody the very values Diana had championed. Sarah's first official interview was scheduled for that evening with a respected broadcaster known for her sensitivity in handling royal family matters. Sarah appeared calm and articulate as she spoke about discovering her heritage and her decision to embrace her royal connection publicly. Learning about my mother was both devastating and healing, Sarah told the interviewer. Devastating because I realized how much pain she carried silently, but healing because I finally understood where my passion for helping children came from. It wasn't just personal interest, it was inherited purpose. When asked about her future role in the royal family, Sarah was characteristically thoughtful. I don't see myself as someone who will take on traditional royal duties. My role is to continue the work our mother started with vulnerable children, but to do it in a way that reflects my own background and understanding. I've lived as an ordinary person for 47 years, and that perspective is valuable. The interview was watched by over 20 million people in the UK alone, making it one of the most viewed royal broadcasts in recent history. Public opinion polls conducted afterward showed overwhelming support for Sarah and approval of the family's decision to acknowledge her publicly. More significantly, Sarah's revelation sparked important conversations about adoption, teenage pregnancy, and the support available to young mothers facing difficult decisions. Charities working with these issues reported increases in both donations and volunteer applications in the weeks following Sarah's announcement. 6 months after going public with her identity, Sarah was invited to speak at the annual Diana Memorial Service. Standing at the podium where her mother had never been able to speak about her, Sarah addressed the assembled crowd with words that captured the essence of what Diana had always believed. "My mother once said that everyone needs to be valued and loved," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the cathedral. She didn't know at the time that she was speaking about her own hidden daughter, but those words guided both our lives. Love doesn't disappear because of circumstances or secrets. It finds ways to express itself, often through service to others who need what we needed ourselves. As Sarah spoke about continuing Diana's legacy through practical action and genuine compassion, William and Harry sat in the front row with tears in their eyes. They were witnessing their sister claim her rightful place not just in their family, but in their mother's ongoing story of love triumphing over adversity. The revelation of Diana's secret had brought healing not just to Sarah, but to the entire family. For the first time since Diana's death, her sons felt that her full story was being honored, including the sacrifices she had made and the love she had given even when she couldn't acknowledge it publicly. Sarah's emergence into public life marked the beginning of a new chapter for the royal family's charitable work, one that bridged the gap between formal duty and grassroots compassion. Diana's greatest secret had become her most powerful gift to the future, proving that love and service could transcend any obstacle when guided by genuine care for others.